You're about to listen to the interview I had with Rebecca Howie, creator of irregularendings.com and also co-host of the podcast Language Chats. Beck Howie is also an enthusiastic Italian learner and she speaks actually multiple languages, but in this specific interview we are going to discuss how she learned Italian and the things that she used, the resources and the things that she has been doing since she started that helped her to get to the current level that she has. We hope that you find this interview inspiring and it also helps you to find some strategies, some tips that you can apply in your Italian language learning routine so that you too can be able to speak Italian. So without further ado, let's listen to the interview. I'm here today with Rebecca Howie of Irregular Endings and Language Lovers AU, and she's here with us today because she is going to share with us her language learning journey, which is also her Italian learning journey. She speaks multiple languages, but I'll let her speak because I think this lady is full of inspiration for us and she's going to really give us some really pretty good suggestions, I believe, to understand how language learning works, and hopefully it will provide you with some really good hints and tips on how to progress on your Italian language learning. So hi Rebecca!
Hi Ermy, ciao, ciao.
Ciao, come stai?
Sto bene, grazie.
Yeah, so Rebecca, she speaks Italian, but she also speaks other languages. And so let's start with your Italian language learning journey because here there are lots of Italian learners, and so they would love to know about how you, because Rebecca, she's fluent in Italian. We spoke a couple of times.
I don't know. I feel like fluent. It's been, well, Italian hasn't been one of my like focus languages for a little while, so I feel like I'm a little rusty. But that's okay.
I spoke in Italian to you, and I do feel you have pretty good conversational Italian, so don't be modest.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So, can I ask, what is the reason why you choose to learn Italian?
So, it's a it's an interesting story, actually. When I decided to learn some Italian, for me, often I get really inspired by TV. I love TV. I really, really love TV, which feels like a very embarrassing thing to say these days. But I do just genuinely really love watching TV. And I have now on many occasions been inspired to learn another language because I've watched a TV show that I've really loved in another language and thought, I really want to learn some of that now. And maybe it's just by force of watching something for, many hours, and then kind of the more that you hear it, the more that you listen to it, and the more that you tune into the sounds, the more you kind of think, well, actually maybe it'd be nice to know what those words mean, and it'd be nice to be able to try and pronounce those words myself. So watching TV was one part of it, and it started with Il commissario Montalbano.
Okay.
So my husband introduced me to Montalbano quite a long time ago now. We're talking like maybe about 6 years ago, I think. Right. Actually earlier, maybe more like about 7 or 8 years ago. Anyway, we started watching Montalbano, these old episodes of Montalbano, and I loved them, and we were really enjoying them. Anyway, and so my husband's family is Italian on both sides, born in Australia, but of Italian background. And so he had a little bit of Italian from like primary school, and his mum also is an Italian school teacher, she teaches Italian at high school in Australia. And anyway, so we're watching Montalbano, we're both enjoying it. There's a little bit of Italian background in there in his family, and then when we decided to get married, we were trying to work out where we wanted to go for our honeymoon, and we decided to go to Sicily. So we had this plan to go on a holiday to Italy, and in particular to Sicily, because we were a bit inspired by Montalbano. And ahead of that trip, I was thinking, I think now I've got to, I have to learn some Italian, because after all of this enjoyment of watching it on TV, and then I was like, well, I've got a trip to plan for now. So probably about 6 months before we went, I thought, okay, that's it. I'm finally going to actually sit down and learn some Italian. And that was it. That was how I got started.
I think this is such a great story, also because wow, basically it started just because you liked something and you were so into it that then it kind of became more, and then you planned a trip, and then oh, now I have a trip and now I need to learn. So it was kind of like
Yeah.
starting from something you're passionate about, and then that it became a trip, and then the trip was kind of what pushed you in the end to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I felt, well, I was like, well, now I had something to look forward to in my mind as well, because obviously a holiday is always something great to look forward to. But also, I'd never been to Sicily. So it was an entirely new place. And it was also a bit romanticized in my mind too, because I was thinking of all of these fun episodes of Il Commissario Montalbano. And so I I knew I wanted to have a little bit of we knew it was going to be a nice holiday as well because it was our honeymoon, but I wanted to be able to have an interaction, with people while we were there. I wanted to be able to try and speak some Italian. And also because I hate turning up to places and not feeling like I don't even know a little bit of the local
Yeah.
language, even if it's just like hello and thank you and stuff. I feel that's a really important thing to do. So yeah, because we had some time, I was like, I can definitely do this. Like, I think I can get myself down with the basics just before we go on this holiday. And even if I know how to just like ask a few questions, that'll be better than nothing. And then I just kept learning after that once I got back.
Yeah, and this is amazing. So you kept learning after that.
Mm.
What motivated you to do that?
Well, I kind of, so I suppose once I had started, I was already feeling like I was making some progress. And the holiday was a nice way to like test it out, because once we got there, obviously I could use it for a few weeks. So that was really nice. And at that point, I was like, by no means, I was still like very much at like simple sentences. But
Yeah.
when I got back, because I was on a bit of a roll, and I didn't want to let it go. I thought, oh well, I'm enjoying this. I'm having fun, and why not just keep learning? So then I decided to kind of make it my focus for about another year after that. I think it was pretty much my main sort of target language for that time afterwards. And I really focused on it and tried to get it to a point where I could have, like a fairly decent conversation after that time. But it was nice to have something, consistent. I sort of wanted to be able to, after I'd been kind of spurred on by that trip, I was motivated, I was inspired, and I had nice memories of it as well to kind of spur me on. So yeah, that was why I kept going.
I think this is so great. So would you say that it was actually progress that in the end motivated you, because you were seeing you were making progress, and so it kind of like
Definitely.
pushed you forward?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. I think you know, you have to test yourself a little bit when you're learning. Like, you need to be able to go out there and like you put yourself out there and you get scared because you're like, huh, maybe no one's going to understand me, maybe I'm going to make all
Uh-huh.
these mistakes, and like everyone will laugh at me and be like, ugh, another English speaker who can't speak any other languages. you you have that guilt. But you know usually people are fine about it. I think we sort of get ourselves into this thinking, we get really scared. And actually most people are really happy when you make an effort, and that's really when you see progress, when you realize that actually just being able to say something is better than not being able to say anything. And then often you know much more than you think you do. You just have to try.
Yeah.
But sometimes it really is just a confidence thing. You have to sort of build up the confidence right at the beginning to just say something, and then have a laugh about it when you make some mistakes.
That's it. Yeah, this is great. This is also what I kind of always underscore to my student. I say, don't worry, just go for it and see what you can manage. And then if you make mistakes, it's all right. just keep going and you will just learn from it. You'll just learn from it and then build your confidence from that. So I have another question, because it seems to me that from what you said, your approach to Italian was kind of like also fairly structured, because it looks like, oh, okay, I am going to learn this for a year. You said I'm going to dedicate myself to a year to this. That's going to be my target language. So it was kind of like a you made a promise to yourself. You set yourself a goal, and then you really went for it, which is something that most people actually start with, but then they cannot follow through, because everyone, most people say, oh, I would like to do this, and then learn it, and then at the end of the year, they set up their how do you say, good propositions, how do you say, like at the beginning of the year?
They're like New Year's resolutions.
That's it. Yeah, that's the word. But then they come at the end of the year and oh, I forgot about that. So can I ask, what was your approach, and how did you follow through?
A really good question. It's funny because as soon as you said it sounds like it was very structured, I was like, was it? Was it that structured?
Okay.
I don't know if it was, but actually, but actually, I think it sort of was and it wasn't. I think I'm quite a structured person in general. I'm quite organized. Like I need structure in my life, but also in my learning, to help me feel like I'm on track. Mm-hmm. So for example, even just like consistency for me is an important part of structure, to make sure that I am knowing that I have things planned, but also knowing that I'm like making time in my week for learning so that I can make progress. Mm-hmm. So when I suppose when I first started learning Italian, I think I was a bit wishy-washy about it. I had this, I was probably a little bit too inspired. So like right at the beginning, I was like, oh, I've been watching Montalbano. I love the TV show. It's so nice to hear all the lovely words and the Sicilian and everything. And then, I got really excited about our holiday. So I had all these things in my head that were like making me dream of all of the ways I was going to use this Italian that I was learning. And initially, I asked my mother-in-law to help me learn some Italian, because obviously she teaches like teenagers all the time. So she kind of got me started in just really, and just the very first steps into that. And then I kind of worked out my own way of how I wanted to be able to progress from there, because I didn't really feel like I needed formal classes. Yes. And I had some resources already at my disposal, some digital things. I had a couple of textbooks. I had some like reading material and some podcasts to listen to. So I had things to use. And, sometimes I find that I work a little better on my own anyway. So I sort of just made sure that I had a lot of resources at my disposal. Mm-hmm. And then I made sure that, for a while, I made sure that I had some time every single day that I could do a little bit of Italian, even if it was really short. So I would try to do Italian on my lunch break. That was usually my time when I set aside between, 15 minutes and 45 minutes maybe to just do something in Italian. And some days I wouldn't have that much time, and I'd just do like 5 minutes on Duolingo, or like some vocab on Drops or something. And then other days I would take a full 45 minutes to listen to a podcast, and then make some notes, and then look at the transcript, and and then have some real time to reflect. But for me, consistency was really important. And that's just something that I like to work to. Other people don't need that so much, but I really need to have the time where I say, I'm going to put this time towards it this many times a week. And then I will know that, after a week, after 2 months, after 6 months, I can see that I've definitely made progress because I've made time to learn.
Excellent. So I like that you actually stick to your time for learning, and you managed to make some time for it. And then you said you use what more resources to learn?
So
Well, you started with your mother-in-law, but then you progressed on your own. Yeah.
yeah. So I had, well, initially I had well, a whole range of resources, I suppose, but I like using apps. So especially for when I don't have much time. So like I started just mucking around on Duolingo, and then I used Drops as well, which is another app, just for some vocab building. I've used Memrise as well. So I had like a few things like that if I wanted to do, if I was just getting sick of one particular
Yes.
app or one particular interface or whatever, I could try something else. And then I quite like, I still like books. I still like physical materials. So I had a couple of textbooks that were, had sort of basic grammar, some exercises if I wanted to do some written exercises, or more like, I suppose, like old school kind of like translating or repetition, but also had like explanations of grammar rules. So if I wanted to go back and find how a particular tense worked or when I should use the particular way of saying things, then I could go and find those rules and I could go and find examples. And then I also really like podcasts. And one podcast that I really particularly enjoyed using was, so one of our national broadcasters in Australia, SBS, they broadcast in many, many different languages. And for Italian, they actually have a podcast called Slow Italian Fast Learning. And it was just a weekly podcast that comes out that's only a few minutes long, but it came with a transcript, and it would be on a current affairs topic, something that was in the news that week. So I quite liked going through that weekly because it would be news that I already knew about, so something I already understood. And then I could listen to the podcast and read through the transcript. And, that would be kind of a nice way to hear some Italian that was using really relevant, like current vocabulary.
Yeah, it just brought me back to a memory of my Spanish learning, where actually I think I used the same podcast but for Spanish when I was learning Spanish. Yeah.
There are a few podcasts like that are sort of like slow news podcasts, I think.
Yes.
In lots of different languages. But so I mean they're just a few things. I'm sure there were lots of other resources and stuff that I was using at the time. But yeah, for me, I like to have lots of variety because I get sick of things. So as long as I've got choices, then I'm kind of okay, because I can come to my time of the day when I've set aside half an hour or whatever just to do some learning, and then I can be like, okay, what do I feel like today, or what haven't I done for a while? Like, have I not done some reading for a bit, or have I not done some listening? Do I need to, or do I just feel like listening to a podcast today? And then at least you have choices and you're not just like, just got my textbook again.
And yeah, I understand that variety is good because it keeps you excited, but it's also and in a way also textbook is good because it gives you the kind of structure, because like what to follow and stuff. If you would just have apps, it would be a bit difficult to understand like what's the logic behind all of it.
Exactly. And like for me, that's very important too. Like I really like to understand. I know not everybody likes grammar, but I do. So when I see something being used, if I can start to see the patterns, I want to know why it's like that. And I still find kind of, again, old style like grammar textbooks really helpful in that way, because I want to know, I want someone to explain to me the rule, and how it works, and then show me some examples so I can go through them myself and go, oh, okay, I recognize that now. I know that's not for everybody, but that's something that I like to have as well.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough. And what about speaking? Because you live in Australia, we said, and so it must be difficult for you to find Italians there to speak. So how did you practice your speaking, or how have you been practicing your Italian speaking?
So well, you'd be surprised. There's actually lots of Italian speakers in Australia.
Okay. Yeah. Where did you find them too? I mean...
So, well, a lot of people there are lots of people of Italian background here. So you'll often find that there are, in addition to there just being lots of also native Italians who just happen to live in Australia and have migrated here, there are also lots of people who have family who speak Italian. And so their grandparents might still speak Italian, or their parents do. So yeah, there's a lot more Italian kind of floating around than often people realize. Initially, like I mentioned, that I had my mother-in-law helped me a little bit at the beginning. So I sort of started off by trying to speak with her. And that was kind of my first attempts at speaking. And it was funny because they were really French influenced, because I already speak French. So when I was first trying to talk in Italian and first trying to learn, I was like really heavily relying on my French. and I kind of felt like everything was just coming out as this like French kind of style Italian right at the beginning. I mean, it took some time until I kind of worked out what I was doing. But then after that, so I had some exchange partners, really. So some people who I would meet up with on, like a semi-regular basis and just try and chat with. And that was mainly how I got speaking practice, because I wasn't taking a class, and I didn't really have a private tutor or anything like that. So I just tried to kind of use it where I could, with some people in like a really casual way, just to practice. And then otherwise, in terms of speaking, I used to record myself. So I would try and do, I was sort of keeping like a language diary via Instagram. And every, few posts, I would, most of them I would just try and write something in Italian. But then every sort of few, I would try and record myself saying something so that I could practice just speaking and maybe get some feedback. And sometimes people on Instagram are really nice and they give you feedback, like constructive, helpful feedback, not just not mean things. They actually are really nice. So I would just try and say something and record it and then put it there and have it as a bit of a record of how it was going, so that I could kind of look back and go back to 6 months before and be like, I could only say like 2 things and there were like 100 mistakes. And then later on I was like, oh, actually this is much better. I looked more relaxed and I was sounding okay and my pronunciation got a bit better. And so that was kind of a nice way to sort of force myself to practice just a little bit too, without necessarily having to like be face to face with somebody for half an hour trying to have a conversation.
Yeah, so it was a mixture of self-practice and conversation practice with people. And what would you advise to someone who is struggling to find speaking practice? How would they look for opportunity? Do you have any advice about that?
I think, well, it depends where you are. I would say if you want to try and have some more speaking practice, and especially if you feel a bit self-conscious, maybe try and find somebody online who you can talk with. I think that's a really great way, like, especially, now a lot more people are using online means of chatting with other people and having classes and stuff too. So I would say maybe look online and see if you can find somebody who you can, either a teacher, a tutor, so somebody who is happy to kind of be there and support you, not necessarily just talk, or somebody who is just willing to chat with you. So maybe via an online kind of teaching platform or something like that might be a good place to start. And then that's always good too, because it's just one-on-one. So you don't have to necessarily feel like you're in a group of people, where like sometimes classes can be really stressful like that, because if you're around 8 or 9 other people who are all also feeling a bit self-conscious, then that can be really hard. But if it's just you with one other person who's pretty encouraging, and most teachers are, then yeah, that can be a great place to start. Another way, if you are feeling very self-conscious and you just need to get started with physically making the sounds, talk to yourself. I think when you're at home on your own, or like close the door in the shower, like all of these times when you're just on your own. No one else can hear you. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say. You can get it all wrong. But sometimes you just have to get past the point of making the sounds or trying to make the sounds, and then realizing that, yeah, you can do it. It doesn't matter if it sounds bad to begin with. But it's just like a really physical thing, I think.
That's right. I agree with that. And speaking of sounds, do you have any favorite Italian words?
A very good question. I think my favorite, I don't have a specific favorite word in Italian, but I do love words that end in the accented A. Things like felicità, velocità,
Città.
università, like these words that have the accent right on the last syllable, that final A.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
They're fun to pronounce. Yeah.
They are.
This is why I said, speaking of sound, I bet you have some words that you might share with us. And you also mentioned that you speak French, and I know that French was your first language, right? The one that you learned.
Yes, it was the first language I learned after English.
Yes. So how do you think that knowing French influenced your Italian learning in good way and bad way?
Mostly in a good way. I would say like 98% helpful. I think after having learned, well, I mean, they're kind of in the same family of languages too, which is helpful. So there's a lot of vocabulary that crosses over. It's kind of very similar. Lots of grammar is similar too. Not always exactly the same, but quite similar. So I think, the vast majority of the time it was really, really helpful. Right at the very start, it was hard because like I mentioned before, I was really like kind of almost struggling to get myself out of French. It was like my default was to French, and then I would try and like Italianize it to make it Italian, which works sometimes, but not all the time. So yeah, that was like a bit confusing only to begin with. And then afterwards, it's not so much confusion as like genuinely helpful, because it just means that when you don't quite know the word, you can guess, or I can be like, oh, it might be like the French word, or if it's not like the French word, it might be like the English word. Maybe I'll try that instead. And then if someone really doesn't understand you after both of those attempts, then you're like, okay, maybe I need to try something else.
Maybe something
but
else
usually
different.
there's two yeah, pick something else out. Or it's just somewhere off the beaten track altogether. But yeah, no, I think actually it was just really helpful. And I'm sure that lots of other people might have a similar experience if they're learning Italian and they have learnt some Spanish. I think that would be also pretty similar. Again, same language family.
Yeah, it's a lot. There are a lot of similarities, and there are actually rules to spot them. So just to link back to what you were saying, that you like the words with the libertà, with the A accent, A at the end. In French, normally those words are the same. They just have an E with an accent, a cute accent, not grave. So
exactly. Yes.
So it's most words, not all of them. So there are some words, and I found, you can find this out. There is a book about it, which I don't remember exactly the name of the book, but I'm going to research it and put it in the link below this video. It's quite an interesting book where it compares different languages that are similar, and you can see the similarities. And then if you know one of those languages, then you can figure out what are the other way to say that word in the other language. So it's quite interesting. So it's good to know that French actually was a good, say, foundation for you to learn Italian. There are also people that struggle, and I know some of my students do speak French or Spanish, and they confuse the languages. So, and they often ask me, how do you not confuse? Because I myself, I speak Spanish and French. But I'd like to know your point of view about this. How do you not confuse, and any advice about that?
Well, I think I'm not sure how to not confuse them, because I think it's more that you have to embrace the confusion
That's
sometimes.
it.
Like,
That's the first step.
yeah, I'm not sure how. I don't know how you would exactly, because I think that would be really different for everyone. There might be particular ways that you remember how to pronounce something, or what the endings are for particular verbs or whatever. There will be rules that resonate with you, but they may not resonate with other people in the same way. But I think it's probably more important to just, like, from the beginning, worry less about being confused. So it's fine to be confused. It's fine to get them mixed up, because that's a totally natural thing to do. And especially when they have similarities, although that can be helpful, you're just more likely to get them confused. So it's 100% fine for that to happen, because all you have to do is kind of, I guess, keep practicing, keep listening, keep trying. And the more that you do that, the more it will start to make sense in your mind, you know, whether it should be libertà or liberté. Because you'll start to feel what sounds right.
That's it. I love that. You start to feel what sounds right. Because you kind of tune in into the language, and then this is also why you were saying about practice. And it's like the more you practice, the better you become. And it's okay to, make mistakes and confuse. But then what happens is that once you're practicing them, you start to feel into the language, and then you will realize what is right. It's just like kind of feeling. It's not more like an intellectual thing. You just have it into you. And
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit like, I often feel like learning languages is a bit like music, in more ways than one. Like, learning to listen to a language is a bit like learning to listen to different kinds of music. They have different rhythms and different tones and different pitches, different melodies in the way that they're spoken, but they're still distinct. So, like, the difference between what jazz sounds like and what classical music sounds like, but it takes some time to understand that one is jazz and one is classical music.
Sure.
In the same way that, you might at first hear French and hear Italian, and those two things sound slightly different, but the more and more that you listen to them, the more that you realize that they sound very distinct. And I think this is where the kind of the practice and the repetition just keeps coming in, because the more and more that you hear it, the more that you try to produce it, the more you feel comfortable, and the more that you can identify what is what as well.
Yeah, I love that. Like comparing languages with music. That's why you're my friend. All right. And I know that you also have a real passion for languages, so that's why we get on really well. And this is also why you have a podcast about it. It's called Language Lovers AU. So what inspired you to, well,
yeah, so
language.
I do the podcast. Well, I don't do the podcast on my own. I do the podcast with a very good friend of mine, Penny, and we started our podcast, which is called Language Chats. So it's part of kind of, I guess, a little bit of a bigger project that we started together called Language Lovers AU, to, well, initially just to try and see if there were more other people in Australia who were interested in languages like we were. And anyway, we started our podcast as sort of thinking that, well, the two of us were having these chats about language, and we were having a lot of fun having them. So we thought maybe we'll just record a few and see if anybody else might like to listen to them as well. And then maybe we could have some language chats with some other people as well and record those. And that was sort of how it started. And so you can find that wherever it is that you like to listen to podcasts. And if you want, you can listen to the language chat that we had with Ermy not too long ago, which was very, very fun. But yeah, it's just a way that we like to be able to, well, I guess, share our enjoyment of language, but also to be able to share some of the other people in our region who speak other languages and work with other languages or like to learn other languages too.
Yeah, and we will link that to the podcast in the comments below. Not in the comments, but in the description below this video. That podcast is like so cheerful and just like it's really fun to listen to. So it turns out to be a really good idea. So well done for well done for making it come to fruition for us. And
my pleasure.
yeah. And also I know that you also combine languages with something else, and you do that at irregularendings.com. Is it irregularendings.com.au? Sorry, irregularendings.com.au. So tell us more about the Irregular Endings project. What inspired that?
So it feels like such a long time ago now that I started Irregular Endings, but it was just kind of a way to combine two things in my life that I really enjoyed. One of them was languages and just thinking that languages were fun and cool. And then also I am quite a creative person. I like to draw, and I like to write. And so when I sort of was, I don't know, at a point in my life about 6 years ago, something where I thought, I want to have something else that I can put these passions into, something that I can just work on that's mine and it's a bit of fun and it's outside of my work. And so I started Irregular Endings by combining both of those two things, and I started making some printed things, cards and now like sort of calendars and some stationery and things like that people could use to enjoy another language, but also that people could use to help practice their languages too when they're learning another language. So that's where that came from.
So what a great idea. So you have like all this beautiful, very beautiful, I have to say, stationery, and it's also pretty functional because you can use it to learn another language, to practice, and also keep your life organized. Like you have all sorts of things, like you have notepads, bags, how do you say, tote bags? Is that the right name? See, I still have sometimes need to think about it. Go and check out those products because they're really, really beautiful and also really good to practice your languages. And again, I'll put the link in the description below. And do you have any final thoughts for people that are listening right now and would like to learn Italian? What would you say to them?
I would say, well, do it. Just go ahead, learn some Italian. You don't even have to learn that much. Just get started. I think that's probably always the biggest sort of recommendation that I would have for anybody who, whether it's for Italian or for another language, just start. Like, and it can feel, deciding to learn a language can feel like a huge project, like like this massive undertaking you have to decide to do and do lots of planning for. Actually, you don't. You can just learn a few words, you can learn a few phrases, and then if you're not that into it, that's fine. But just getting started and learning a little bit to begin with is often the hardest part. Like, not working yourself up into this kind of almost like stressful mode of being like, oh, but it's this massive thing and I'll have to pay for classes and that'll be expensive, and then where do I get the books from, and what if I have to, then I'll have to speak to people and then they'll tell me I'm doing things wrong. Like, none of that has to happen. You can just learn a few things, see how you're going, listen to some podcasts, look up some stuff on the internet, see what it is that watch a TV show and get inspired. But try a few things out, see what it's like, see how it makes you feel, and if you like it and if you enjoy it, and then you can decide from there.
Great advice. So get started. Don't be scared. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just do one step at a time, And
exactly.
Thank you so much, Beck. It was a great chat. And you guys who are listening, please do go and check out these ladies' podcast and website, irregularendings.com.au. Got it right this time. And I will see you in the next one. Ciao.